I think the most difficult thing, George, was the realisation at that point that the police weren't looking for Madeleine and that they were just focused really on trying to, I guess, blame us and for it all to be over. And obviously that is, one of the most damaging things that could then happen to the search, really, was for the police to stop looking and to convince the general public as well that we were somehow involved.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're looking at the latest news updates on the Clairvoyant's apparent leads. That's why I put it in inverted commas. And, what has happened? What has happened as a result of this apparently breaking news, right? And this is the sort of style that the McCann case has been known for over the years, which is one moment the media trumpets breaking news, suspect or something, and then the very next it's sort of, oh, nothing's happening. And then it happens again and again and again. And it seems like every single time people fall for it, right? And even in my previous video, I put in inverted commas, Madeleine McCann found. And it seems like maybe a quarter of the people who watched the video didn't actually wait to actually read the full headline, which the second part of it was, where should we be looking? And obviously if you'd read the full headline, you'd realize, well, obviously he doesn't believe that because he's saying, well, you should be looking somewhere else. And that was what the video was about. And I also explained that in the video, that instead of looking in the northeast, as this clairvoyant suggested, I thought not so much now, but during the investigation they should have looked in the southwest. And I thought there were many good reasons to do that, including the fact that there was so much misdirection towards the east, and that's what I explained in that video. So in this video, I want to talk a little bit about where we are now, what the updates are, and one of the updates is that German officers are apparently going to the area. They're going to Portugal in July, and they're apparently going to be looking in the area, right? Now, you have this strange thing where the Germans are sort of making, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as a lot of people are concerned, outlandish and silly and crazy claims. And then the Portuguese who are in Portugal, the Portuguese authorities, scoff invariably at what the Germans say. And so you've got this strange thing going on. And it's almost a parallel to what happened with the British authorities and what the British media was saying, right? And so in an article in the Sun, they talk about this strange German prosecutor, Christian Walters, who's apparently leading this investigation. And he apparently used clairvoyance in the past, in other cases. So, he's used them in the past and now he's using them again. And apparently the Portuguese responded to that just to say, well, you know what, we've already looked there. And it's not a very long distance from the McCann's apartment. It's something like 6 miles away. And that area, basically the area to the east, was searched up and down, thick and thin. They really searched through a lot of that particular area, especially the Roja Negra, but that whole area was really searched often, over and over and over again. And it's sort of crazy to think that 14 years later, oh, well, search the area again. Maybe you missed a spot, kind of thing. There's a saying, I think Einstein said it, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It doesn't always apply in true crime. In true crime, you can look at something, the fifth time and then find tiny traces of evidence. So that can happen. In fact, that did happen in the Patrick Frazee case, where they were met with this pristine scene in terms of the living room. And then when they were told by an accessory what actually happened there, they tore up the floorboards and then they did find something. In the same way, in a way, with the Madeleine McCann case, they were presented with the apartment 5A, didn't look terribly, there wasn't really much to see there, but then when the dogs came, they found something, and then they searched, for example, behind the couch, and they found what they found, right? So you've got to be careful in true crime with the idea of not looking at something over and over again. But I think you've also got to reach a point where you say, okay, we have looked at it several times and we've now exhausted that possibility. It's interesting how the media plays it both ways, that they will first sort of prop up the clairvoyant and say, wow, this guy's had amazing success in the past, and then they'll sort of admit that his claim is making wild claims, right? And so it actually says here, Portuguese officers are aware of Mr. Schneider because he's been making wild claims about what happened to Maddie for many, many years, right? So if you know that he's been saying for a long time, look in this spot, then, and he hasn't been saying it once, he's been saying it many, many, many times, and nothing has happened from that. No one has found anything. That puts a totally different spin on it than this idea that, suddenly out of the blue, he says something and, well, maybe this is it. Maybe this is a breakthrough. And of course it's not. The same article talks about the detectives on the ground in the Algarve have said that it's not something they should spend any time on, right? And apparently it says, they go on to say, officers are sure she's not there, And then you've incredibly had this pushback from the clairvoyant, from Schneider, saying, insisting, I don't give out that information, that kind of information lightly. Meanwhile, it turns out that he sort of has been repeating it over and over again. He talks about being well aware of the responsibility of what I do. And the crazy thing is, at the moment that this search has been kind of dismissed, that's the word that they've been using in the headline. So one moment you have all these headlines saying breakthrough, big clue, Madeleine McCann found. Then, a couple of days later, it's claims dismissed. And then at the same time, he's come up with kind of another claim, and that is that they should be searching for a hiker, I think. That I think it's another British hiker, Esther Dingley, who vanished in the Pyrenees. So almost at the same time that you're trying to deal with the fact that this isn't legitimate or it's not going to go anywhere, then it's like, oh, there's another sighting. And so then all your attention sort of moves to the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing. Now, personally, I do believe there is a place for intuition in true crime. It's quite a difficult thing to talk about because it's very subjective. I would say 90% of when people think about intuition, that's not what I'm talking about. So things like clairvoyance, I wouldn't say it would never ever work because you can't rule out intuition. Even maybe in the area of hypnosis to some extent. But I'm talking about if you're looking, for example, at a ransom note and you're looking at the handwriting and you can't prove 100% that it's exactly the same, but it looks similar, and that's what I'm kind of talking about, right? I'm talking about where you don't have absolute evidence, but you've got your intuition. And you've got to be careful because intuition can be fed with bias, and you can be intuitively on the right track in one case and then take that intuition which has served you well into another case and not be right. So I do think there's a role for it, but I think it's quite a small role. Another area where I think it's somewhat valid is body language and statement analysis, but again, you've got to be very careful. And it's because of this carefulness and difference in interpretation that anybody who's talking about this can say what they think, and if there are enough people who believe them, well, you can't prove them wrong. It's speculation. And some people make a living on that. And, I've heard some really well-educated people talking about body language when they know nothing about a particular case. and then they make prescriptions, and they get incredible amount of support, but they actually don't know what they're talking about. And the people listening don't know that they don't know what they're talking about because no one really knows about the particular case that's being discussed. So you've got to be very careful about that sort of thing, but I think it does have a place in true crime. So the other thing that I think is quite interesting is, regardless of what the Portuguese have said, the German officers are apparently going to visit Portugal anyway, and one wonders what that's all going to be about. Are they going to go to this area where it's supposedly the Portuguese officers have said, well, don't even bother going there? Are they now going to go there, and then what? Is there going to be a press conference there? What's that all going to be about? And so there is this very strange public relations effort going on, trying to implicate, trying to pin something on this suspect, Christian Bruckner, right? And he made a point, and I'm certainly not on his side. I don't think he's pure as the driven snow, but in terms of this case, I don't really think his involvement is really relevant. I think the whole trumpeting of Christian Bruckner at this time, I think that is very relevant. But I think it's quite strange how there's this massive amount of public relations where we want to talk to the media about, something that's going to implicate him. And then you have things going on like even what a clairvoyant says, and it's a German clairvoyant, even what this clairvoyant says, let's tell the world about it, and then what happens? It's nonsense. But it is possible that some good could come out of the Germans actually going into Praia da Luz themselves and putting boots on the ground. I've got my doubts because it seems like they've been misled and that they're on the wrong track from the word go, right? They seem to be looking for someone who took Madeleine, right? And I don't think that is valid in the least. Now, there's just been a case in Greece where you've had a scenario of this guy crying wolf. It's in the Caroline Crouch case. I'm sure you're aware of it. But this guy who comes up with this elaborate story, and there's a certain amount of minimal evidence to back up what he's saying. He's saying that, there were 3 people breaking into his place. I think he thought that they were immigrants or something, and tied him up. And so while he's tied up, they did what they did. And so it turned out afterwards, based on quite extraordinary technology, I think his wife's fitness app and some other information, that actually it turned out that when he said he was tied up, something else was happening about an hour earlier. And so anyway, at the end of the whole thing, turns out that he's been acting, that someone else broke into his apartment when it was actually him all along. And that's, I think, quite a typical thing. You're having the same situation in the Nora Corrin case. And if you're interested in me doing a video about that, I've written a book about the Nora Corrin case, Not All Who Wander Are Lost. But if you'd like me to talk to you about the Nora Corrin case, I'd love to do that, especially given the overturning of the inquest. But I just want to come back to this notion of a break-in in the Madeleine McCann case. When I went to Portugal, and when I stayed in Praia da Luz, for the first time I had a direct experience with the shutters. And, it's one thing to be told about the shutters and getting a sort of second-hand sense of them through what other people say, and it's another actually using them yourself and struggling and having a first-hand experience. And my first-hand experience was, in the beginning, I never made the link between the sort of strange kind of contraption next to the window and the shutters. I just didn't know what it was. There was no brochure, no one explained it to me, but I suppose people thought you would just obviously assume this is for the shutters. So in the beginning, I would try to raise and lower the shutters by hand, and it was quite a messy, tricky process, and those shutters make a really, really loud noise when you open them or close them. When you open or close your own shutters, other people can hear them, and when other people open or close their shutters, you can hear them. It's really, really loud, and especially with apartments that have that facade, it creates this sort of echo when this really loud rattling takes place. Now, you might think that those shutters are sort of if you think just in your mind a window shutter, you might think, oh, well, it's just like a board that sort of opens or closes, almost like in Amanda Knox case. But they're actually slats that go up into a sort of alcove, a little bit like a garage door. But it's just very, very loud noise. I'm not sure if they're made out of wood or plastic. I think a lot of them are made out of plastic, and because it's quite a heavy contraption, you use this cord. It's kind of almost like a conveyor to pull the shutter. And in the first day or two, I didn't realize there was this connection, and so a couple of times I actually went outside thinking maybe I must go outside and actually manually, move the shutter for something to happen. And I just couldn't understand why it was so difficult to maneuver the shutter. It was just like impossible to completely raise or lower. And so initially I kind of just left it half raised or whatever it was. And then obviously I realized, okay, so this thing next to the window on the inside, that is used with the shutter. And I then used it, and it was a lot easier, still made a noise. But in terms of the Madeleine McCann case, there was the story that the shutters were damaged and the shutters were jimmied. But you just can't move those shutters from the outside, and you would be stupid to try. It would be it's like a person standing outside a garage door with a whole bunch of flats on the other side, open terrain, and there you are trying to open the garage door and commit a crime, and everyone can see you, and you're making this incredible racket. But the most important thing is that there was no evidence on those shutters, either of fingerprints or that they were actually damaged. If those shutters had been damaged, then that would have been a big sign or something like that. And so you have that same thing coming up in the Corrin case, in the Madeleine McCann case, and I presume also in this Caroline Crouch case where, well, supposedly someone came in from the outside. Well, where's evidence of that? Where's evidence of the break-in? And where's evidence of that person? DNA, clothing fibers, footprints, breaking something, stealing something, and there invariably isn't any. So I do think if you look at something like the Caroline Crouch case, you are sort of going into the same mythology as the Madeleine McCann case. You have headlines and statements such as cops have spent weeks searching for the fictional Albanian criminals, right? And really the reason why they were able to solve this case was because the 33-year-old husband confessed to it. He basically came up with a story and then eventually couldn't back it up, not so much because he had a change of heart, but he didn't really have a choice. That basically found evidence proving that what he was saying wasn't true, and so feeling he had no other way to go, he then confessed. It's a confession based on being shown that you are lying. And the police actually described him apparently as a top-class actor for staging this crime scene and playing the grieving widow for over a month. Grieving widower. There are also some similarities with the Chris Watts case, just in terms of the fact that Caroline was apparently going to leave her husband on the night that she died. And so then that happens to her. And you can see it in two ways. You can see it in the way of, so on the day that she was going to leave her husband, these 3 Albanian immigrants break into the home. Well, that's quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say? And then obviously it turns out not to be the case, and so her leaving him turns out to be very relevant. Caroline apparently left diary entries dating back to 2019 showing that the couple's relationship wasn't perfect and they'd been arguing a lot, and there was actually a lot of physical things happening that weren't very good. And the police came up with a 26-page discovery, I guess, their file or their report, showing that Caroline's diary, showing in her diary that she was wanting to leave her husband for quite a long time. So you have all of that there, but what he wants you to do is dismiss that and say, oh, it was from this break-in. And he even took it further than that. I'm not going to go through what he did with the family dog, but that's the length he went to get people to believe him. So I'm not going to take it further than that. I do think it is very troubling what's going on in the Madeleine McCann case. You know, if you think that the circus couldn't get any more ridiculous, it just does. And I hope that by the end of this year, there's going to be some clarity from the European Court of Human Rights, because it just seems to be getting worse, doesn't it? And I think all of these are kind of circus acts in order to either influence that in a conscious way, or it is something that is happening as an extension of that in a weird way. So bear in mind, tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, I think it's 7 p.m. in the UK. I'm not sure if there's been a change in daylight savings or anything like that, but it's 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. I'll be talking about managing your fear, and it's going to be quite a fascinating subject. We're going to take it through true crime, but also beyond true crime, and then hopefully also find some application in your life, which I think is possibly going to be quite useful, perhaps even quite helpful. So look out for that. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do like, share, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys next time.